What if I told you that the real MVP of the Florida Panthers is backup goaltender Anthony Stolarz? We're going to discuss that more on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, April 11th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Terms and conditions apply. So, Cats fans, very excited to bring you this episode and really an extended conversation based on everything coming up because the real season is about to start 9 days from now, but who's counting when it comes to the real season, which is the postseason, which is the ultimate goal for the Florida Panthers to get to finally win Lord Stanley's Cup. But we do have a special guest on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, and it's a voice that not necessarily you've heard on the podcast before, but a voice that you have heard in the arena singing the national anthem and the introduction to the Cats and Rats podcast of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. He is Mr. Jon Acosta, musician, goaltender, father, worship leader, all of that. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Armando. It's a privilege to be with you guys and with all of the Panthers fanatics who listen to this show and abroad.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much once again for joining. And honestly, I do also want to say this publicly too. When you and I met up in the first intermission of the game against the Red Wings, I really had a time of my life talking to you off the record and all. It's a shame that we had the buzzer going to the second period to end our conversation there, but grateful to have you on the show to actually talk Panthers hockey. So because this is your first time on the actual show, tell everybody a little bit about your story on becoming singing the national anthem for the Panthers, and also your fandom going pretty a little bit back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the story of singing the anthem really was I was on Twitter one day and I saw that the Panthers had posted a link about, hey, we're holding auditions and to be an anthem singer. Anybody interested, sign up and whatnot. And so I did that, and I was kind of like, you know what? I'll do this, I'll figure it out. And the way I saw it is like, man, if it gives me the ability to go to some Panthers games, not have to pay for it or whatever, that'd be great. That's what I saw it as. Nothing. I didn't think it would get to the point where it has been now, which has been incredible. I mean, the experience to have been able to sing not only games during the season, preseason, but then playoffs and that incredible run the Panthers had last year. And yeah, I mean, that's really what it was. The story was I get to the audition and I was the last guy there. It was about another 50 or so folks who were also auditioning, but I was so late that I honestly thought I had missed the cutoff time to actually audition because, traffic, South Florida traffic, it's like any little rain or sprinkle, it's like people forget how to drive, So it was a great experience. I got there, got to meet some of the folks who run the game presentation, Mike Messino, Lauren, the camera, and so on. And it was just a great experience just to get to meet them. And I remember the audition itself was held in the arena, not on the ice, but in the arena. And I remember listening to myself sing. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And but like for me, singing is not a big deal. Like I as you mentioned, I'm a worship pastor here at a church in South Florida, and for me, singing is just what I do for a living. along, but like it's so minuscule compared to everything else. I mean, the real thing about it is, you got the people aspect of it. You're developing teams. You're overseeing a lot of stuff that's happening on any given Sunday. And, for me, the singing portion of like I talk to people all the time is like, man, how do you do it? You must get so nervous and everything. And I'll tell you, I really don't. Like the singing aspect is literally the easiest part. I think where I get more nervous is just the interaction of getting there, and because you never know. Like I remember there's a couple times that I'm walking in just as some of like a visiting team was showing up, and it was like, wow, this is crazy. Like that to me is where I would get the most nerve. But then beyond all that, like I think being a Panthers fan that I've been since the 2002-2003 season, where I get the most nervous is actually watching the game. But it's honestly one of the best experiences because in that I was able to take my son with me every game, and everybody kind of recognizes me, not necessarily for me, but because they see a guy who's carrying a backpack and he has a little 3-year-old, a 4-year-old held by the hand, and it's funny. My son is like, you can spot him in a crowd of 1,000 people because he is blonde haired, blue eyes, like crazy. And neither myself nor my wife have blonde hair, blue eyes. But the thing is, my background is my mom is from Finland and she is blonde hair, blue eyes. And so my son is a spitting image of my mom who's from Finland. And also the Finnish side of my family is a lot of where the hockey fandom comes from. I think the way I got into being a Panthers fan is back in the 02-03 season, my aunt and uncle, they were season ticket holders for the Panthers that back then. And, the Panthers have always had a high number of Finnish players. And so there's a big Finnish community down here in South Florida, Lake Worth especially. And they're all very big Panther fans because of the Finnish. I believe even the Panthers have a Finnish fan club or something where they get together and whatnot. And so that's how I got into it. I remember the game itself was a game against the New Jersey Devils, and this was in January of 2003, if I'm not mistaken. And that game we lost. We weren't very good in those early 2000s, outside of that one playoff run that we had with Pavel Bure, where we ended up getting bounced by the Devils also that year. And ever since then, there was always this, after that 02-03 season, I had gotten hooked after that game. And mind you, there wasn't a lot of success to experience. So I didn't know what it was like to see your team in the playoffs, to see your team having success, getting far in the playoffs, So like for me to experience all of this now, it's just been so full circle. When you consider like even growing up, we didn't have a cable TV at our house. So like in order for me to actually enjoy games, I would have this portable AM radio that I would have in my bed, kind of hidden from my parents, because we were supposed to be in bed and whatnot. And I'm like 9-10 years old or something, and listening to Goldie back then on the radio and Randy Moeller after him, so it was just amazing to then now experience what I've been experiencing and have interaction with these guys that I've been listening to since I was a little kid. I mean, even you, Armando, I think the first Tampa Bay series that we had, playoff series, that's when I really first found, Locked On Panthers and would listen to this podcast. And it's just been so full circle, getting to meet you and others and just experience this success that the team is having nowadays in a way that is so personal to me as a fan. But beyond that, as I really do feel like I'm part of, what is going on with the Panthers. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me. I mean, like you said, I'm married. I've been married. This year will be 8 years, got 2 kids, one 4 years old. The other one, she's 8 months. And she's a handful, let me tell you. So like it's just been an incredible blessing to be able to experience this, not just with, friends, but also meet people on Twitter, X, and just have something to connect with outside of, the craziness of our society. That we're in a very divided society currently. I think people with many different viewpoints and opinions, but to see how people who might have completely differing opinions on things to just get together and watch a game like hockey. I mean, that's what sports does. It brings people together, and that's really what I'm about. And I'm just excited to get to experience that at the level that I have been.
That's great. That's great. I love hearing that from you. And now also when you talk about your background with like music and the team and then meeting people after and interacting, it's also great to hear. And also love your background with the few guitars there as a fellow, as a former musician myself. Shout out to all my baritone and trombone players out there and bass guitarists too.
There you go.
When it comes to that too. So definitely great to see that everything has come full circle, and the Panthers being you being a fanatic and also being so bought in 2002. I spoke about pre-recording even on this podcast how 2012 was my experience on really watching hockey on the daily and all that. But now we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to actually get to the hockey and actually get your opinion on something that Paul Maurice spoke about on Tuesday after the game against the Ottawa Senators, and get the goaltender Jon's perspective on everything. We are going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Factor, and eat stress-free this spring with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. Also, discover more than 60 add-ons every week, like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day long. What are you waiting for? Get started today and fuel up your springtime meals. They're tailored to your schedule, you can customize your weekly meals with the flexibility to get as much or as little as you need. Pause or schedule deliveries to suit your style. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 and use code LockedOnNHL50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box. That's code LockedOnNHL50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. Once again, that is Factor Meals. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel, a program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Back on this Thursday, April 11th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Here with Jon Acosta, Anthem Singer for the Florida Panthers, who you will catch him next Tuesday when the Florida Panthers take on the Toronto Maple Leafs. The next time he will be appearing in the arena to sing the national anthems with the Canadian team being in town too. So, Jon, I want to discuss something about because you go back now 2 decades with the Florida Panthers. I'm going to play a little bit of a video of what Paul Maurice said Tuesday for that win against the Ottawa Senators. Here's that clip for us.
So there's a certain amount of weirdness the last 2 years. I know. Let's change it to uniqueness. We get some unique guys in there. For some guys that just don't look like professional athletes, and they're elite at it, right? And then lots of different personalities. So what I think you find is because of the room the way it is so accepting, the guys are completely comfortable truly being themselves, and then that weirdness or uniqueness comes out. If it's an uptight root and cliquey room, it'd be no different than when you were in high school, right? You're not sharing your weirdness with everybody because you get mocked mercilessly for it. Now, you still get mocked, but everybody gets mocked, so it's fair. So it's kind of like, it's kind of like that. The room allows everybody, and the coach too, like it allows us all to be goofy at times, or just as stupid as we all are, right? Just then not be afraid of it.
So based on what I love that, by the way, from the coach, and also you've seen the Rick Dudleys, the Mike Keenans, the Jacques Martins, as far as the front office for the Panthers, the amount of turnover, and now stability with the franchise. And also that question was asked based on something that Anthony Stolarz said earlier in the post-game media availabilities, which not only how impressed are you with the culture change, but also Mr. Goaltender, I want to ask you how and I want to ask you this. What if I told you that Anthony Stolarz might be the actual MVP for the Florida Panthers? Floor is yours.
Yeah, so first I'll address a little bit of the uniqueness of the culture of the team and whatnot, and we'll address that, because that's a very juicy take I mentioned to you earlier. But yeah, 100%. I think the franchise has found a way to get both the abilities of the players themselves and also the character traits of them and have it in such a way that mesh really well. I think they've been very intentional about the type of players that they get. Not just size and speed and ability, whether they're right hand, left hand shot, but also just the qualities that they bring as individuals. And the one thing that I do notice, not just about the front office, but just everybody in general, is there's a very intentional type of brand that they look for in a person. It kind of reminds me of, you look at some of the other franchises that have very particular branding when it comes to the type of people they hire, the type of people they have on the field. You have examples of that, in Nashville. Nashville is a very particular market where their team as a whole, they look for a certain type of player. They have a certain type of coach, a certain type of front office member and whatnot. And that stems across the entire team. And I think the Panthers have done an incredible job from the top down, just to make an environment that kind of accentuates the different individual traits that these players and coaches and all of the other people that work behind the scenes, all of the different things that they bring to the table. So they've done an incredible job at that. And like you said, we've seen all kinds of turnover with the Mike Keenans of the world, the Jack Martins of the world. And it's just been incredible to see how now we've finally gotten to a point where the front office has got their stuff together. The coaching staff and general manager and the team has their stuff together. And just as a whole, they've put it all together. I mean, they've literally gotten to the point where this is a team that can be a perennial contender even after this year because of some of the groundwork that, Bill Zito and company have put in place. But beyond that, some of the different things, I look at, we want to talk about goaltenders real quick, the goaltending excellence department that kind of is headed by, both Rob Tallis, Roberto Luongo, and actually Leo Luongo as well, and some other folks there. They've done an incredible job working with the personality, I gotta say, of both Bobrovsky and Stolarz, and even before that, Alex Lyon. Alex Lyon, I mean, let's be real, he was a weird dude, but he had a way of adding value to that locker room. And again, I can say that I'm a weird dude myself. We all have an element of weird, and
oh yeah,
Coach Maurice was alluding to that, where I think players feel like with the Panthers, they're not having to be something that they're not. And I think in some markets, you have a situation where there's this pressure of performing to what your role is perceived to be. And with the Panthers, it's no, listen, this is what we brought you here for. This is what we expect from you. And it's very clear cut. We don't expect you to be somebody you're not. And we've seen it, how players such as Gus Forsling have blossomed. Stolarz, who would have thought Stolarz would have this season that he's having, and whatnot. And even Bobrovsky, I think I put a lot of the resurrection of Bobrovsky's abilities, career and whatnot in the coaching, but also in the goaltending department. Because again, and now we're getting into the goaltending thing. Goaltending is a very cerebral position. It's potentially the most processing. I think the only other sport or position that I could think of is the quarterback position, where you're having to process what is the defense doing? Mm-hmm. What are my receivers doing? Are my receivers going the right routes? Where do I need to let the ball go? And in hockey, very similarly, you're constantly communicating to your defensemen. You're telling them, hey, whip it around the boards or whatnot, or trying to keep track of where the opposing team is. If there's anybody on the backside that's open for tap in and whatnot, there's so much that go to it. Now, as far as what if you told me that Anthony Stolarz is the MVP for the Panthers, and it's not as a controversial take as I think some would put it as, because what Stolarz does incredibly well, and this is a trait, you can't teach this, it's his size.
Mm-hmm.
Stolarz's size, I mean, you look at how much net he takes away, even from his butterfly, it's incredible. And the one thing that I did notice, if you look at some of the beginning of the season games, I feel like he was playing a little deeper in net than what he currently is. And one of the traits that Bobrovsky is known for is his aggressive nature when it comes to depth and shots, and you could see some of that with Stolarz. I think, again, it's one of those things that, you know, and I mentioned to you this earlier, that if I had to choose between the two, I would really have to go into it thinking, okay, what am I expecting from the game that I'm about to have? Is the game that I'm about to have going to be a very high event, high shot type of a game where it could end up anywhere between 7-6, 6-3 or something like that? I'll probably prefer Bobrovsky simply out of the basis of what he did against Carolina in that overtime game. I mean, he basically played almost 2.25 games that day.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing too, like the Panthers play a very specific forechecking defensive style that doesn't really allow a lot of shots. And you saw that perfectly with against the Senators recently. There was I think the Senators had about 13 shots on goal after the second period or something like that. And most teams are getting that in one period. So that to me it tells you everything about this team when they're bought in, when they're playing that defensive style, and really playoffs, like you mentioned, when you start playoffs, that's when the season actually starts. And so that's when you're going to see these guys' engines really rev up to 100, because, you know, you need to conserve as much of your ability, or much of your energy, to be able to go 100% when it comes down to playoffs, because you're going to find yourself in 2-1, 3-2 type of games, in games that, you know, might end with like 20 shots on goal for a team, and which that means you're going to have very limited opportunities. Now, in a situation where I have a 20-shot game or low event type of game, or a game that of a team that plays a similar bruising style as ours, I think I would probably go Stolarz, primarily because Stolarz is the type of guy that, you know, he takes so much net, and you have a defenseman, or you have a defense that does a good job at, you know, getting rid of the rebounds and whatnot. Again, but it all comes down to that. Is the game going to be a really high event type of a game, or is it going to be a low event, high defensive struggle? And again, you could go either way, truly. But I do have to say, what Stolarz has done, I mean, currently having a 2.03 goals against average and a 925 save percentage, which is both first in the NHL, being a backup with an overall record of 15-7-2. And mind you, he definitely hasn't had the amount of games that Bobrovsky has, but nonetheless, that goal against average and save percentage is incredibly impressive. I will say, as a caveat, you can't always go just based on that, because when you look at the games that Stolarz does play, because I feel like also because the team knows that they got Stolarz playing there, I think defensively they do a more intentional job of making. It's similar to what we saw with Alex Lyon. Whenever Alex Lyon was playing, the team defensively was, I think, a little bit more intense than they would with Bob, because with Bob, they know, oh, Bob's back there, we're not worried. Like, and you saw that, how Matthew Tkachuk alluded to that in the Brad Marchand breakaway from last year. They all felt like, you know, Bob's got that. You know, do I put Stolarz in that situation and think that Stolarz can make the save? Yeah, he potentially could, but I had to choose between Bob or Stoli on that one play. It's going to be Bob every time.
Yeah, and the reason also why is because what it does to the department as a whole. Bobrovsky's still going to get just under 60 games, which is still a good enough workload. And also, if the Panthers do decide to move on from either Bob or Spencer next year, you not only do you have the option, but if they decide to keep the two, you still have a full year of Spencer Knight developing. And listen, the Chicago Blackhawks moved on from Anthony Niemi after they won the Cup in 2010. Former Panther Anthony Niemi, by the way. Very short stint, but still, you still have that option. And that's why I think it's more than just the performance there, but what it's able to do, what it's been able to do for the whole the department as a whole for the Panthers, which I think is really what has made Stolarz so valuable, even if he is here for only 1 year. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss more about tonight's matchup and just the overall mindset of the Panthers going into these next 3 games. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Candidates you invite apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply for your jobs than candidates who only see it in search, according to U.S. Indeed data. With Indeed, matching as soon as your sponsor a post, you get the short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Boom. It's hiring at a warped speed. Indeed knows you're going to grow your own business. You have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost for application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Segment number 3 here on this Thursday, April 11th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. Here with musician, anthem singer, goaltender, and Panthers fan Jon Acosta here on the show to talk everything about the Florida Panthers. We're recording this currently. It's 10:29 a.m. on a Thursday, and Jameson Olive tweeted that a whole bunch of guys are taking the option. So as far as rest, we're not going to know until Paul Maurice speaks to the media, which has not happened yet, or maybe we might find out until we might not know until puck drops. So that's the update as far as the lineup goes for the Panthers. Also, the Florida Panthers have signed defenseman Mikulas Hovorka, right-handed shot, 6'6" defenseman, 229 pounds to a 2-year entry-level contract starting in the 2024-25 season. Big guy who, hey, they're trying to get value out of these signings, possibly a guy who could shot block, bring it up the ice, win some board battles, and obviously got to do this when you lack the draft assets that the Florida Panthers do with this. So the Florida Panthers come into this one, third and final matchup between them and the Columbus Blue Jackets, their first matchup since early December. I remember that was on the same week as a West Canadian trip, which the first one was in Columbus, then they finished off in Western Canada. Probably a big part of the season that was not the best for the Florida Panthers, as they were shut out twice in that one. Also, I believe the Dolphins were playing Monday Night Football against the Titans that weekend, which was why the Panthers were scheduled that game. But it's funny because you look at the bottom 6 for the Blue Jackets, John. Only one player has played in the previous matchup. The only one being Sean Corrali. The defense pairs, everyone played except Damon Severson. He was hurt in the last matchup, missed over a month. And Jet Greaves, only 7 career games, but one of them came against the Florida Panthers, gave them a challenge last time around. So a lot of injuries. Adam Fantilli is out. Patrick Laine, day-to-day Boone Jenner, Elvis Merzlikins, and Daniil Tarasov, and Kent Johnson's on IR. So big, huge opportunity for the Florida Panthers to just take advantage, not mess around going into this one. Last home game, the Florida Panthers did squander a lead, but then we're still able to win in overtime. And just when it comes to these last 3 games for the Panthers, just really, this is the like I said earlier in the statement, not the time to mess around for them for it, as far as that for this. So how are you looking at this matchup between the Panthers going into this one against Columbus?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Columbus is going to come out hungry because they have jobs at stake for next year. So, like, you're going to have a lot of the younger guys who are going to go all out. And when you have a situation like that, you're going to have some foolishness with, like, over-aggressive behavior and whatnot. So, like, I think the number one worry that I would have is just stay healthy. Don't get into unnecessary scrums. Do what you can. Like, protect your guys, but at the same time, do the best you can, considering the fans are going to be in attendance and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, the thing is that Columbus, I think their record doesn't really reflect their talent on their team per se, because like guys that I feel like are eventual breakout candidates. You got David Jiricek, right-handed shot, who I was really big on when he got drafted. And you have guys like Kirill Marchenko, and of course you have Fantilli, which Fantilli I remember in some of the development games that they had or prospect games, like he looked amazing. So this is a team that again is on the up and up, and I think much like we were back in the 02-03 season, having a lot of turnaround that they're going to have to do internally. You know, they let go of Jarmo Kekäläinen earlier in the year, so they're going to have to, you know, figure out some stuff in the front office, coaching as well. They had the whole thing that happened with the coach Coach Babcock, exactly. So yeah, I mean, as a Blackhawks team, again, from a Panthers point of view, they're going to come out hungry. And again, I can foresee Bobrovsky being the guy playing tonight just because of the Columbus link. But one thing to look at is, you know, we technically have the Panthers, that is, we technically have the option to go with Magnus Hellberg, as he is on the NHL roster as far as I understand. And you could see a lot of the other guys, like one guy that was huge in the one game I saw him play was Tobias Bjornfot. And I think I immediately became a Tobias Bjornfot truther, just based on, you know, how I saw him play. I don't know. There was just something about the guy that I really liked. So I could see a situation where we put a lot of like these younger guys in prominent roles. I don't necessarily foresee us recalling anybody from Charlotte to actually get some NHL experience because of where we are as a team and getting ready for playoffs and whatnot. And also the cap situation. So, you know, it's not like we have a ton of flexibility there either. So overall, I feel like, you know, the Panthers, this is a game that they're going to want to win, because I don't know about you, but I would much rather face Toronto round one than end up having to face a team like, you know, whether it be Boston or Tampa. And I would like to do that at home as opposed to on the road. But again, you could go either way there, because I feel like this team has a propensity to play really well on the road. So again, the Panthers could also lose the next 3 games, and it's not going to really matter in the grand scheme of things, because the goal is not to win the last 3 games of the season. The goal is to win the cup. And, you know, is this the year that the Panthers actually do that? We'll see. I think that they can, if what they did last year is any indication of what they can do again this year, I think this year they've come into it now with a lot more experience. Even Bobrovsky, who's a grizzled veteran, said that he learned more in that playoff run from last year than he had in his entire career, basically. So there's a good chance that this team is going to be able to, at the very least, repeat what they already achieved last year. Again, we're missing some key cogs from last year. I think, you know, for as much as you want to say about Mark Stahl and Radko Gudas, those guys were a big deal for the culture of the locker room, for, you know, being able to call out the guys that they needed to call out and being leaders on the team per se. And as much as you know, I mean, again, Twitter was ablaze most of the time whenever Mark Stahl would make a mistake or whatever. But again, they've never been on the ice. So like most of these folks with these opinions are like, guys, get on the ice and actually do it. And then you'll see, you know, how easy it is to, you know, make a pass to the tape or not do a, you know, bad turnover or whatnot. And it's hard, because let me tell you, there's one thing that playing hockey has taught me, especially the goaltending position. It's just how much goes on throughout the game. And it really it's brought a level of respect, not just to the goaltending position, but to hockey players as a whole, you know, that have to deal with injuries and, you know, the fact, you know, I think back of Aaron Ekblad playing on a broken foot. And if you look at like the last couple games against the Golden Knights, like the skating ability he had, I mean, I couldn't really tell that he had a broken foot, you know, and mind you, that broken foot happened in the Boston series, which is even more crazy. So yeah, I mean, again, I think the Cats are in a great position, and regardless what happens the next 3 games, the important thing, guys, it's okay. If we lose the next 3 games, it's okay. As Paul Maurice had mentioned, you know, everybody just calm down, you know, just collectively take a chill pill. And something I learned actually based on that reaction that Maurice had, because again, I think people were calling, even myself included, I was expecting a bit of a Paul Maurice tirade, even against the Red Wings, because prior to the Red Wings game, they had lost, I believe it was against the Flyers or whatnot. And I was fully expecting a Paul Maurice tirade, but you just see him on the bench, just kind of like letting the players coach themselves in a sense, really cool. And if there's ever a time you see him get irritated, it's more than likely with the referees, and so I don't know. I think Paul Maurice knows the team that he has. He knows what the players are able to do. And I think the players have bought into the point where they know what they're capable of doing. And there comes a point in time where you can't just go into a room and start yelling, because again, it becomes just noise at that point. And again, the team has everything in their favor right now. They have the experience. The only thing they don't have is the actual cup. And hopefully this is the year that we all get to experience the joy of being a Stanley Cup champion and experiencing that in South Florida, which I think that will only further the growth of the game in South Florida. Even myself, I've seen many people that I've met, even on the rink when I'll play, my local beer league or whatever, that they became Panthers fans or they got into hockey recently because of the success that the Panthers have had. And even folks who don't play, like just random people who are mostly Dolphins fans or Miami Heat fans or Marlins fans. It's a question of the success has brought the fans. When you play good, when you have success, the fans will come, especially in South Florida.
Yep, definitely, with how many different backgrounds and culture and the melting pot that is South Florida, for sure. And with Maurice going into a room, records aside for comparing this year and last year, it's really about the fact that he's been here enough time. He knows that what the players know what he's about, so he doesn't have to necessarily go in and yell in the room because they know what the expectation is. So the fact that you've created that relationship as a whole really helps, especially in stretches, even though it hasn't been the best.
The other thing too that is also something that is unique to this year is the players really are holding each other accountable. I think even Alexander Barkov being the captain, he's really doing what a captain needs to do, holding guys accountable. And then you got some of the older guys like Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who really has something to prove. And I've really loved his, tenacity. Like, I didn't know he could be as physical as he has been, so it's been really exciting to see that. And then you got guys like Brandon Montour, who's a bit of a class clown, but like, he's a gamer, like just like Maurice had mentioned, like he's just a guy that he's going to come out and he's going to score that really crucial goal or make that really crucial play. And then it goes down the line, the Vladimir Tarasenko and Kyle Okposo trades. I think the Okposo was more of a depth thing that helps the locker room, but I think he can, there will be a game or two in the playoffs where I think he'll contribute. But Tarasenko, having that cup experience, knowing what it takes, especially if you look at that team, that St. Louis Blues team that won the cup in 19 was very similar in terms of the makeup of it as the Panthers team from last year. The only difference is the Panthers weren't able to get over the Vegas Golden Knights. So that's going to be crucial when we look down the road, second or even third round of the playoffs, assuming we get there and whatnot. So it's going to be amazing to watch. And I hope everybody's ready and buckled up to experience this as a whole.
Yep. Once again, 9 days away from the postseason starting, and but who's counting? Who is definitely counting for sure? But Jon, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you. I'm thankful to have you on to just talk hockey and also be present with you in this space here and talking about everything in relation to the Florida Panthers. Tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Absolutely, man. And thank you so much, Armando, for this. This has been great. And basically you can find me on all platforms as Jon Acosta Music. It's always a pleasure to be able to interact with fans in the games, but also on Twitter and whatnot. And so, I'm just excited to just be another one of the crazy Panther fans in this community that is really hoping for this team to have success. And like I said, if you ever see me, I'll be there on Tuesday, the 16th. I'm always willing to say hi and chat it up, and you and I had that conversation in the hallway there. That was really cool, and we could have gone on for hours, talking about stuff. And man, it's always been a great privilege to be on here, and hope to continue to enjoy this Panther success together, man.
Awesome. We will definitely have you on again in sometime in the future. Thank you so much, my friend, and I will see you very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jon Acosta, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.